Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Don't you know me, Kansas City? I'm the new Berlin Wall. Try and tear me down. I was born on the other side of a town written too.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. We're hanging out on the Nerd Party Network, a collection of podcasts dedicated to all things entertainment. Make sure you check it out at thenerdparty.com and follow us at Join Nerd Party on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it now, and just at the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm very thrilled to have back on the show Brian Bitner of the Beyond the Screenplay and Lessons from the Screenplay team. It's been way too long, but Brian, it's wonderful to see your beautiful face. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It has been too long, so I'm excited to be back.
Was the last episode we did Harakiri together, I think.
Yeah.
God, it's been a couple years, and that movie was amazing.
Yeah.
We've kind of had a tradition of, I think when you were first on, I introduced you to a movie that you hadn't seen, and that was Titanic, and then we flipped it, and you introduced me to Being There, which I hadn't seen, and then we were like, let's pick one we both haven't seen that is highly ranked on whatever, IMDb, Letterboxd, all of these lists, and that was Harakiri, and that was quite the experience. And now we're going back to, I think, one that is a favorite of yours that I haven't seen, and that's Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So tell me a little bit about this movie. This is one of your all-time favorites. Is it top 10 material?
I would say it's in the top 10 conversation. Over on Beyond the Screenplay, we do top 10s of the decade. And so we started in 2010s. In 2020, we kind of did a look back, and then we did 2000s and 90s, 80s, 70s. And when I was doing 2000s, I had Hedwig at number 3 or something. And then my partner and I watched it, and we both love it. And I was like, is this my favorite movie of all time? Like, I had that like moment, right? I ended up putting it at number 2 under Lord of the Rings because it's Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
But it definitely just made me go like, man, I really, really love this movie. And I remember back in the early 2000s, it was one of those things I heard about. I grew up in the East Coast, so not too far from New York, and it was just you hear a phrase and then you hear that phrase every once in a while on MTV or wherever. I think like Rosie O'Donnell had them on to perform or something. But I didn't really know what it was, and I never checked it out. And then a good friend of mine who was my movie buddy, where he'd go to college when I was a senior in high school, and he'd come back and be like, have you seen Fight Club? Like, no. All right, we're going right now. You seen Being John Malkovich? No, we're going right. He was like ushering me into,
Right.
So he was finding like Donnie Darko and some of these movies before I was, and kind of passing them on down to me, right? And then he watched Hedwig, and he was just like, this movie's brilliant, you got to watch it. And then I remember I was in like I lived with my dad at the time. I think I was in college, but like home for the holidays or summer or something. And I just remember being in my room and putting it on and just like feeling different when it was done. And like in a way that I like remember where I was. I remember that room had multiple layouts. I remember the layout of the room at that time and everything, it was just, there was something about it that just absolutely struck me.
So you knew from the get-go, like it wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, it had to grow on me. You were
exactly. Yeah. I think like there are movies like Scott Pilgrim's a good example of a movie that when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, I wish that was as good as the trailer led me to believe it was. And then I watched it a second time, and I was like, yeah, I like it, but and then somewhere around the fourth time, I was just like, I love this movie so much, and it just like all that stuff that it was like I'm not sure how I feel, like all that stuff wore away, and then I was good to go. And yeah, Hedwig just immediately just kind of broke me, and I feel like changed me a little bit, and it's never gotten old. Like it's just been a movie that every time I watch it, I'm just taken to that same place in a way that I find really beautiful.
I love that. One of my favorite experiences of revisiting films is that moment you described of a film you love, but you haven't seen in a while, and you're just like, oh yeah, well, it's been a minute. Let me just put this on and see if maybe it still holds up. And then that just like, oh, this is what I love about storytelling. This is what I love about cinema. Like
Why
I've
haven't
had
I watched this movie in the last 5
Yes,
years?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And you know, in later years, I've become a little more trepidatious about rewatching films that I really love, because there are films like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars that I'm so familiar with that in some ways the magic dissipates a little bit, and
Mhm.
so now I've become very cautious about it. But I also feel that sense of like, you know, an example that leaps to mind is for Missing Frames. I introduced a friend of mine to The Graduate, which is one of my
Mm.
top 10 favorites. And I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I hadn't seen it probably since I was in my 20s. And I was wondering, like, you know, I was in my 30s at this point. I was like, I wonder if that was like one of those movies that you really have to be that age to appreciate. And then realizing, no, I still love this and it still speaks to me in the same way it did. And it's an experience that I cherish a lot. So I think that's really, really cool that you got to experience that. But I know almost nothing about this movie. I mentioned to my wife Sarah that I was watching it, and she was like, "Oh, the musical, the play. I know there's a play," and I was like, "Sure, sure." I don't know. Is the movie based on the play or vice versa?
The movie is based on the play.
Okay,
Basically, the story. I'm trying to think of what to what to tell you now versus what to tell you later. But I think
right.
it's pretty safe to say that the John Cameron Mitchell, who plays Hedwig in this movie, and Stephen Trask, who I don't know, barely has a line in this movie, but he is the guitarist of Hedwig's band. He's
Okay,
going to be the sort of musician that you see the most, who's not the other singer, Yitzhak. The two of them just met on a plane, and kind of what Stephen Trask is a musician, John Cameron Mitchell is an actor and writer and director, and they just were, one of them had an idea, and they kind of started talking, and they turned it into this sort of off Broadway musical. And the musical is basically, there's a set, there's a car on stage. Hedwig is like standing on the car and kind of doing a show to the audience, being like, here's my life, let me tell you about my life, sort of,
okay,
not like a one person show because there are other characters, but it's almost like the band is just sort of playing those characters when they need to and everything, right?
okay.
So then when that caught on, John Cameron Mitchell decided he wanted to um, turn that into a movie. So the movie is not like Suburbia where it's just people on one set,
Yeah.
doing stuff or whatever. The movie is, here is Hedwig's full story.
Okay. Okay. Very
So
cool.
that's the
I
origin
love
of
that
that.
too. That was well, first of all, I think that's great. I love when the creator of something gets to adapt it for another medium.
Mhm.
Sometimes it doesn't work, but there are lots of examples where it does work. And William Blatty, I think that's his name, who
William Peter Blatty.
adapted, yes, who
Yeah.
adapted The Exorcist from his novel. Like sometimes it's movie magic, and
Right.
I love. It sounds like this worked very well, having him adapt it himself and
It did, and
participate.
I think a lot of times adaptation works best when you don't try to make the original thing.
That's the other thing
And
I love hearing, is that it sounds like it was like, well, making a movie is going to give us a new angle to tell this story, or
right.
through which to view this story and these
There are a lot of
characters.
movies based on play. Proof comes to mind, where it's just like when you're sitting in a theater watching actors perform this, every line feels elevated, every moment feels, tangible. When you're watching that same exact thing with actors on a TV screen, or movie screen, um, it's removed a little, right? So it's sort
Yeah.
of like, what's the language of film? What can the language of film bring to this? And I think that sometimes when they just try to film a play, it doesn't quite have that same thing to it. Um, the other thing I'll mention, because I think this is going to be fascinating for you to know going into it, is we talked about being there. John Cameron Mitchell also said that his biggest influence for the style and sort of texture of this movie was Hal Ashby.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, and I realized watching The Holdovers recently, which is basically Alexander Payne trying to be Hal Ashby. I
I'm
was just like,
sure.
oh yeah, there is something about that Harold and Maude, Hedwig, Holdovers, like texture is the word that keeps coming to mind. That thing that there's something so gritty and kind of visceral, but also cinematic
Mm,
going on there. Hedwig is nothing like those other movies I mentioned tonally, but I think that you'll appreciate going into it knowing that this sort of that kind of almost documentary feel of filmmaking, especially that was kind of taking off around the early 2000s,
gotcha.
is very much adding this extra layer over everything that wouldn't be there if you tried to make more of like a straight comedy or drama or, you know, whatever the sort of normal way to make a movie was at the
Sure,
time.
sure. I guess I'll try to predict, knowing as little as I know what this
Yeah.
movie is about. There's music involved, obviously. Uh, I, Hedwig is gay or trans. There's some element of that in the film, or in this story. I know that much. Um, and it is a musical.
Hmm.
So they are a band, and Hedwig has just decided to form a band to put himself out into the world, or put herself out into the world, and uh, music is the means through which she feels she can connect with the true version of herself. And the band, they're they're all you know, along for the ride.
And
And
they
they
just have one more payment to make on that house,
that's
and if they
yes.
get the big
and
gig,
and then if they get the big gig, they save the orphanage. They
yeah,
get to pay, they can pay all the money they need to save the orphanage. And the church will accept
yeah.
Hedwig, and finally, you know, give her the love and support that she needs to win the day. That's my prediction. And there's a dog that plays basketball in it
Of
as
course,
well.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So that's my prediction of the film.
Her name is Hair Bud.
Here,
Um, two responses to that. My first is no, but my second is there are some interesting thematic things that you kind of got butted up against
accidentally,
there.
yes,
Yeah, so
completely by
I think
accident.
it'd be interesting
Okay.
to talk about that once we're on the other side.
I love this, and I love kind of going completely blind into it. And I feel, in some ways, I feel like maybe that's how you saw it, and I feel excited.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
I feel excited because, again, as is evidenced by my predictions, I know next to nothing about this movie. So let's do it. We'll take a break. I will watch it. We'll be back to discuss it. Stay tuned.
Now available to own on video cassette.
All right, Brian, we are back. I always get very nervous watching any movie for the first time with anybody when I'm the person in the hot seat who hasn't seen it. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking because you want to enjoy it, especially when, in your case, it's a film you love so much, and it's a top
Hmm.
10 and favorite film of the 21st century. Or I don't know, is that what we would say? Would we go that
I think
far?
it was second favorite of the 2000s. We
Second
said,
favorite of the
yeah,
2000s. So I mean, so this is held in high regard. So I'm like,
yeah,
oh God, if I don't like this, Brian and I are never gonna, we're just, friendship is gonna be over. It's gonna be
it's
done.
true.
It's
So
the
anyway,
way
what'd you
thing.
think?
That's how it worked. I hated it. No, it was great. It's the epitome of a punk song, but with a layer of poignancy that I think maybe the on the basis level punk doesn't have. But it's got the grunginess, it's got the attitude, the like irreverent humor, which I was expecting it to be funny. I was not expecting it to be kind of like a little zany,
Uh-huh.
almost. Like there's a zaniness to it where I was like, is this, eh, are they putting me on? Like I couldn't tell for sure, because the movie is relatively, like you said, it's pretty grounded in the way it's filmed. Like there's
Hmm.
it is filmed with a reality in the settings. It's not super flamboyant or flashy, but then you have these elements of magical realism and
Yeah.
animation that kind of come through and sort of give it that vibe of like, this is sort of a fairy tale-esque thing, and that gives you permission to sort of see it a little bit more than just kind of this just straightforward story of this character and these people. So it took me a little bit to kind of like, there was a moment where I was kind of well, more than a moment, but a little length of time where I was like, I can't tell if this movie is putting me on or not. I like it seems sincere, but then it also is kind of like very, very silly.
Right.
But ultimately, incredibly moving.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And I do think, you know, it's like I think Moulin Rouge was the same year, and it's like talk about two musicals that are both very zany and both very dramatic and kind of really trying to do something. And Moulin Rouge, I have a love-hate relationship with because sometimes when the filmmaking is really zany, it takes me out of it. You know, it's like the most
That's how
dramatic
I feel
moment.
about Baz Luhrmann in general.
Right. It's like the most dramatic moment in the movie. The gun flies out the window and like donks the Eiffel Tower, and I'm like, why now? Like you could, if you did that earlier, fine, right? And I do think this is an interesting example of a movie that says like, yeah, we're going to do this zany, but then we're going to marry it with this Hal Ashby kind of grounded thing. Um, and the thing that I love, I want to get into sort of the musical aspect of it, but something that I don't think I really appreciated, I'm curious to hear if you did, the first couple times I watched the movie, is that it slowly moves into that magical realism thing. Because since she is in a band, the music is diegetic. The songs are diegetic for the first about half of the movie.
Right.
So you're not just suddenly the characters like looking out the window at the moon singing about, you know, how sad she is, her son is gone, whatever. You know, like the
Right.
it's like Willy Wonka, like Charlie's
That
mom
sounds
has
like,
a
yeah,
song, you
cheer
know
up,
what I mean? It's just
Charlie.
like right, it's like why this character is not even in this movie. um and and so then you're getting all this backstory and everything, but in these bilge waters, you know, like horrible things. And then it's Wig in the Box, which is about halfway, if not a little more, into the movie, where it is now we're kind of doing musical theater thing where it's like she is just like in bed singing to herself and then the band kind of comes in. But even then it sort of feels like we're almost marrying we're with the band performing over here. And then we're going to get into a little bit more traditional, I'll call it, musical stuff where a character just starts singing and everyone kind of knows the moves and everything.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of both those things because the band is there as the band. They just happen to be sort of like the drums, you know, it's strapped to his chest and they're kind of outside
Right.
the trailer and everything. But then it's like the movie doesn't suddenly like take a sharp turn where then it's just that forever, you know. But then by the end, when she walks into like the stadium and Tommy is there on the black stage and everything like that, you don't go, wait a minute, did he stop singing in the middle of a show to come do that? It's like, no, it's like
Yeah.
you have earned just sort of musical land at this
We've kind
point.
of
So
completely disconnected and ascended into that kind of dream realm of like,
right.
this is you know, not super surrealist, but like everything is grounded in a reality, but we're no longer tethered by like the laws of reality. We're now in this kind of ethereal plane where she is going through her very dramatic change and reconciliation with Tommy. It's just like at that point I was like, you know, I was with the movie, and it's an overwhelming movie to kind of talk about after one viewing. There's a lot
Hmm.
going on in the movie, so it was very interesting because again, at the end, I was just sort of like, kind of like you were saying, not necessarily confused, but also like, is this like, are we reaching the end? Like, is
Right.
this kind of the conclusion? Are we going to have we left the realm of reality completely? Are we returning there, or how is this gonna pan out? And then the way the movie ends, it was just kind of like, huh, okay, interesting. Like, this is something I'm gonna need to like dwell on a little bit and think about and like
Right.
reflect on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if the movie, um, just to sort of bring that full circle, like I think if the movie had done that the whole time, then you're in Moulin Rouge land where it's like people love that movie, people hate that movie, but it's like in the first 20 minutes you're going like you might hate this, like we are going to push you, you know. I think we did a podcast about it, and Michael, our host, said like it's trying to push you off the bucking bronco and seeing if you're willing to stay on, right?
Right, I like that.
And obviously this movie does just open with a bang of just the opening
Yes.
song and everything, Tear Me Down. And then, you know, it's going to be a little while later till you get to Angry Inch, where the movie is maybe doing it. It's best to throw you off the bucking bronco. But
Yes.
in terms of the filmmaking, if it was just in dream space the whole time, I feel like it'd be a lot harder to keep us on board with the story, especially because the story is all told in flashback, like the musical. So I really, it took me a couple viewings to really appreciate that it did that. That it sort of said like, we're gonna just be, here's a band singing some songs for half the movie, and then
Yeah.
we're gonna slowly kind of
Yeah,
pull back the musical theater curtain a little bit. Not too much, but enough to earn, like I said, that ending.
totally. And I think, part of what I think it is it Moulin Rouge is not punk and Hedwig
Hmm.
is punk. And I think if you open with a blast of like just complete theatricality or complete disconnect from reality, that's not punk. And that's
Right.
not the vibe of the music. It's not the vibe of the character or the film. We kind of are using this kind of this raw angry form of music to channel Hedwig's emotions and her kind
Hmm.
of just all the things she's grown up with and dealt with and is currently dealing with, and just the way life has treated her and the people around her have treated her, and the anger she feels towards everybody around her. It's
Right.
just, there's a rawness to it. And as we learn more about her, the movie kind of starts to open up a little bit. It's the rawness is still there and still very much a through line and the heartbeat of the movie, but we're given permission to kind of dream a little bit, as she is. Like, she's
Yeah.
kind of going from like feeling very locked down in this persona she's created, almost as not just a release, an emotional release, but a defense mechanism. And then finally, she kind of frees herself, or allows herself to be freed of this persona, to pass the torch on and sort of rediscover who she is. And everything speaks to that. And I think as Baz Luhrmann films go, it is one of those things where it's like you're going to get that for 2 hours or
Hmm.
however long his movies are. And there is a level of exhaustion where if you don't find the right balance, your audience is going to get worn down. And I think that
Right.
is the danger of a lot of his movies. And what impressed me about this film, and just in general, like with John Cameron Mitchell, his ability to translate, this is his baby, really. Like, it's his and Stephen Trask's baby,
Hmm.
to be able to take a kind of the core of the story and then translate that cinematically, when I don't think he hadn't directed any film before
Right.
this, as far as I know. Yeah, right. Okay. So
And then he went on to become a director, and then
yes,
actually make movies and stuff, which is really
that
cool. Yeah.
that is, I was talking about, because I just watched with my good friend Richie. He introduced me to Little Shop of Horrors, the movie. I hadn't
Mm.
seen that before. And something I told him about that impressed me is just the ability of a filmmaker to recognize the inherent joy of a theatrical music experience, but being able to translate that into film for him, because
Right.
it's not easy. And it's not something that even the most experienced of filmmakers can struggle to do it. There are
Right.
like many big budget productions of famous musicals that just don't work on film. I'm thinking of Cats, and or maybe that does work. I mean, it could, maybe that is a masterpiece. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge of like, I'm curious what your just overall feeling of musicals is. Like I like some musicals, but I feel like musical as a thing, it's just like I'm always kind of going in with my shields up a little bit,
Yeah,
and I feel whether it's seeing a musical on stage or seeing a film musical, it's just like anytime that the characters like come with purpose to the front of the stage
yeah.
and start like addressing, I just kind of go like, is this the best avenue for this story,
Yes.
because like you're making me feel, you're making me not feel immersed in whatever this
There's a
world is, right?
flamboyance to it, and especially, on stage, the flamboyance kind of comes with that territory. But there
Hmm.
is that moment of disconnect, I think. And
Right.
the play then has to kind of pull you into the world as an audience member. And I'm
Right.
with you. I mean, I love a good musical. I'm not a devoted fanboy, as far as like I haven't seen any number of theatrical productions. A lot of my, like, Les Mis, I've seen a live I've seen a live high school performance, the second half of it. I missed the first half, and then I saw what's his name's movie, which
Yeah.
was interesting. And so I I tend to get a little bit more turned off by some musicals that are more serious. I think because of that disconnect. I think sometimes they struggle to find the balance and being theatrical and creative while also being sincere. I think what you're talking about is I relate to that completely.
Right, but what I was gonna say was, like, I do appreciate that there is just this spectrum, and not a spectrum that goes this way and that way, but a spectrum that goes in every direction, um, of just, like, the approach to take. It's the same with comic book movies, right? It's like you could make Logan, or you could make Sin City,
Yeah.
or you could make Batman v Superman, right? Like it's like you could go in all these crazy directions, or I'm trying to think of, or like Thor Ragnarok or something,
Yeah.
right? It's just kind of like you could be like, hey, let's take this comic book movie and make it as like film as possible, like, right, like it's down to earth. Nobody has a superpower, like everything's explained, everything's da da da. Or be like, like literally you're going to see Biff and Pow on the screen, and like that's because, and like both of those are perfectly valid choices. They're just a different approach, right?
Right.
And I think it's the same with musical movies. It's been we've been making these things for 70 years or more, and specifically musical movies, and like I think they're still trying to figure out like what is the right way to do this,
Yeah.
but I'm not against any one way of doing it. I just know that I'm going to sort of bounce off of certain approaches and certain styles, especially those big over the top kind of things,
Yeah.
more than others, which is why, and like Rocky Horror is another one of my favorite movies, and like that's also a musical, but like there's something I also for some reason really gravitate towards queer stories, so maybe it's like
Yeah.
that's a prerequisite of of a musical for me,
Well,
or
like,
something.
but that also has that kind of rebellious spirit. Like, it's a
Right.
musical, but it's also kind of an FU musical,
It's
and that's
kind of
what Hedwig
avant-garde,
is.
it's kind of
Yes.
irreverent,
Yeah.
irreverent,
Irreverent. Yep.
irre-
Let's make it irreverent.
Yep. It's kind of irreverent. And I feel like, yeah, there's something there that makes me go, the musical knows it's not trying to be the most serious thing in the world, or that it's not being like, this is the absolute proper way of doing this, and like you better like it. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like, we're here to have fun, we're kind of goofing around a little bit, and hopefully by the end you feel something.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
I think what the struggle is when you're going to see a live performance, it's going to make a major difference um, to watching a version of that in a movie theater. And sometimes the energy doesn't translate. And that I
Right.
think is the struggle for any filmmaker. How do I take what works about this on a stage and the energy of that, but turn it into a film? And some people I think like don't know how to make that jump. Like they say,
Hmm.
like, I'll just take the play and I'll just kind of film a version of the play and do that. And what I love about this movie is there is a cinematic sense. And that's what I like. What impressed me, I think, is that Mitchell is kind of like, as a quote unquote amateur filmmaker,
Hmm.
he emerges from the gate with such confidence that speaks to it. It's not a let me show off because I want to prove that I'm a director. It's what's the best way to tell this story? How can I tell it visually? And what is unique about the cinematic form that will make this a wholly standalone experience for people who have never seen the theatrical version of the play or the story. How can we make this work? How can the cinematography tell this story? How can all of these things work? And one of the things I think is perfect that you wouldn't really get in the theatrical performance is and another great example of like a moment that you kind of think you know where it's going and then it becomes sort of zany and funny and you can't help but laugh is when Tommy is leading Hedwig
Oh yeah.
through the hanging laundry, and it's like, oh, like yes, finally we will embrace our love for each other,
And I
and
Will
then it
Always Love You is playing from,
yes
yeah.
yes, so it's like it's already funny, but then it's like he's just leading him through this endless like hanging laundry, like just forest of laundry, and it's
Yeah.
just like it goes on, and that's something. I mean, like I guess you could do it in the play, but visually the way the shots are set up, just having it be those kind of those close-ups back and forth of them looking directly at the camera is what really makes that joke work. And
Right.
it's just it's great filmmaking.
Yeah, there's a real cinematic kind of maturity here for, like we said, someone who hadn't directed anything before, because I feel like the cinematography or the direction, the filmmaking, everything is never really showy, but it's also not so kind of punk rock and like we're not going to try to actually make a movie. We're just going to put the camera somewhere and we're going to
Yeah.
film it, because it feels like they really know what they're doing. There's like the when they're playing the Menzies Fair and they have the one listener, right? And then just suddenly
Yes.
there's a shot of like the side of the stage, and then she's there, and then she takes a step towards the stage, and it's like you didn't need to prepare that shot. Like you could have just told the story up close, tight on both of them, but then you just gave me this like little cinematic moment, right?
Yes.
Or during something like Origin of Love, where the way that the story is told diegetically in the movie, the way the story is told is there are projections behind Hedwig on on the wall of the
Mm.
the Bilgewater's the restaurant, and then of course once we cut to the animation and we're actually watching it as like that doesn't feel like, oh, the movie is suddenly animated or something like that. It's like, no, you've already established we're just seeing what is happening diegetically in the world,
Right.
right?
Right.
So yeah, there's a real, I think, beauty to the filmmaking here that makes it feel, that makes it, like you said, I think confident's a great word, but sometimes confident can mean just sort of balls out, like, look at,
Arrogant. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, like, look at my Dutch angles and look at my quick zoom and whatever, and it doesn't feel like that at all, which I love.
Yeah, and I mean that could be fine. That could work for some
Yeah.
films. It's okay, but it's like it doesn't work for every film. And I
Hmm.
think some filmmakers, maybe new filmmakers, get tripped up is the need to impress, like to be like,
Right,
I
exactly.
deserve to be a director. And
Yeah.
it takes real confidence and real understanding of visual storytelling to be able to know when to go all in with like the animation or like something. I loved, like, speaking of that scene that you're talking about, like the wide shot of just the porta potties, almost like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
some sort of like Stonehenge. Like it's like a beautiful, like, look at this beautiful work of art, and it's like, yeah, porta potties, things like that. But like, knowing how is this going to serve my story and how is this going to serve the characters, but then like letting the audience have fun. And like musicals should be fun, there is a larger than life element to
Right.
them. And so having the trailer open up and suddenly there's this gigantic performance and there's spotlights in the background and it's crazy and flashy and it speaks to the scene and it speaks to kind of the energy of the song. But I think it is a testament to the ability of him, of Mitchell, that it all works so well. And it I, that never ceases to impress me because I've seen musicals that just don't work on film and technically are like highly acclaimed musicals that should be like, oh, I just, it's like you take a great book, it should be a great movie, right? It's like, well, no,
Hmm.
you have to adapt the book to film. Like it's not just a straight to, like, you can't just copy and paste. Like you
Right.
have to come up with a way to tell this story that's unique to that medium. And that's what I think impressed me the most, especially as a first time director.
Right.
Just was very, very impressed by that and very moved by the story as well. Like I was expecting, I wasn't expecting an emotional gut punch. I think, like, I was
Mm.
expecting to be like, oh, this will be like affecting, but I wasn't expecting by the end kind of, I guess you kind of prepared me when you were telling me, like, you're like, I saw it and it really like affected me. It changed
Yeah.
my life in a way. But I wasn't expecting that for myself. I don't know if I would call it life changing for me, but it stuck with me. Like I was
Yeah.
not expecting that. Even as I was watching it, I was like, yeah, this is fun. This is fun. And then the movie kind of like, I didn't realize that it was working its way like under my skin and really,
Uh-huh.
really getting to me. And like by the end of the film, when he's kind of shed this makeup, this outfit, this persona, and he's kind of walking off down this dark alley, and you're kind of feeling this sense of like, I hope he's okay. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
I want him to be okay, and I don't know what's going to happen to him. And then it's over, and I realized, I was like, gee, that is that is the power of great storytelling. And I got to the end of the film realizing that the movie had kind of unexpectedly uh, won me over, and I hadn't
Right.
truly realized it until that final shot. And that's funny because it's similar to Being There. I think Being There was a similar
Mm-hmm.
viewing experience for me, is watching that and being like being amused by it and amazed by it and by the performances, and then not sure how I felt, and then reaching the end, and there's that amazing shot at the end of Being There where you're kind of like, it hits you in a way that kind of brings everything home, but then makes you appreciate everything that came before as well. But I'm curious, what about the film affected you personally, like that first viewing? Like what did you think spoke to you the most about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean that final shot is so bittersweet. You know, they're in the alleyway and their tattoo is now full. It's both halves, right? Um, and you know, it's one of those images that I feel like in you can either immediately have an understanding of it, or you can both immediately have an understanding of it and grapple with it for quite a while, right? Where you know, and John Cameron Mitchell has said like Hedwig is not Hedwig is a genderqueer character, and tends to use she her pronouns. But there's a podcast that's really fascinating called Hedwig Inch by Inch, and it's literally every episode of the movie of the podcast is 1 minute of the movie, where
Oh,
the host has a guest on, and then they of course they talk about like all sorts of things, but then they'll just sort of be like, okay, so what do you think about the opening credits or whatever.
right.
um and but they'll use they them to talk about Hedwig, which I think both are totally fair. um but the point is, whether it's, you know, whether they are their own other half, whether Tommy is the other half, and they've kind of, it's kind of like the end of Fight Club. You're like, I don't need to know exactly what happened or
Yes,
why it happened,
yes.
but I know that there's a completion here. I know that there's a satisfaction here for the character, and therefore there's a satisfaction for me. And so yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot here that just scratched my particular, or like, I guess I should like checked my particular boxes. I love a good for someone who's not like a big musical fan. I'm a big music video movie fan, and what I mean by that is like a Tony Scott movie, or Scott Pilgrim, Challengers more recently, you know,
Mm.
something that feels like we are using every medium kind of at our disposal in film to take you on an emotional ride.
Yeah.
And there's something about Hedwig that it's like, I'm also just like bittersweet stories, and stories that are using both comedy and kind of drama, and you know, this, I wouldn't say there's like tragedy here necessarily, but that sort of that feeling, you know, that texture
Yeah.
of to just take you on this crazy ride. And I just felt like I had such a good time watching it, and yet was sort of emotionally slaughtered
Yeah.
throughout the course of it, you know. um and it's interesting, if you look at like the songs in order. It's like you open with Tear Me Down, but
Yep.
then you go into The Origin of Love, and then you've got Sugar Daddy, and then you've got Angry Inch, and then you've got Wig in a Box, you know,
Mhm.
and then you've got Wicked Little Town. It's like it's kind of always doing this. We're gonna like ride this emotion for a while, but then we're gonna just completely change gears and go to this other
Yes.
place, and it all feels cohesive. um so I think there was something about that, and like I said, there like I do, as just like a straight cis man, I do gravitate towards queer stories, and I think there's something there where it's like whatever the sort of like, here's someone who's different and is grappling with that
Yeah.
sort of molecule is there's something there that I feel like speaks to me, and I feel like you know, in very different ways in my own life, I've gone through that. And so I think there's something there where it's like, sometimes you just see something that feels like it was made for you, and you're like, how does anybody else, how is this for anybody else? Like this
Right.
just feels
Right.
like it's for me, you know. So I think it was just all of that, just the filmmaking, how smart and how funny it is, and then how emotional it is. And then kind of just like really feeling like I connected with the character, and the story and everything, like kind of she's going through and stuff. And then just, yeah, at the end, that kind of gut punch, you know, um, that just sort of makes you not know what to do. It's almost like you want to it's like when you wake up from a dream and you just kind of want to not move or open your
Yes,
eyes
you want
because
to
you just want to
dwell on it a
stay in
little
like
bit.
wherever that place is. Yeah. And, we've all had that moment where the credits roll of movie and you're like, I don't want to get up from the theater. I don't want to look over at the person who's next to me. I just kind of want to like stay in this place for a little while. And then of course it's how does the movie stay with you? And this movie
Yeah.
just stayed with me in a big bad way. And I think Blade Runner is a movie weirdly that did this with me, where it was like I liked it the first time, but then it was like every time I watched it, I just liked it more and more. And I
Same.
was like,
Yeah.
that happens so rarely, Like I will see a movie, I'll be like, that was incredible, and then I'll watch it a second time, and be like, okay, like some of the magic wore off. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that And then so I'm always fascinated when a movie just every time I watch it just actually gets better and feels like I'm now noticing things that I didn't appreciate before. And this movie has so many
Yeah.
just fun little I was thinking of this movie and Scott Pilgrim in the same kind of thought, where it's like both
Yeah.
movies that are just they're so full of detail, where it's like you could pause the frame at any moment and just be like, oh, I never realized that like that thing is in the back there, or like this thing is happening, or like that line that just happened off screen that I never heard the first 10 times I watched the movie. Like that's brilliant. um and um yeah, so I think I was some combination of all that. I was also, impressionable age. I was in my, I think, early 20s or something, and big like Bowie fan and everything. So I mean, there was something there, like I said, that just felt like this is my exact kind of weird, and it's
Yes.
um
Yes.
it's something I'm sort of I love the current A24 thing that's happening, but I feel like there are good movies and there are weird movies, and a lot of times for me personally, I'm like, but where are the good weird movies?
Yes.
And like Everything Everywhere All at Once and Poor Things, I feel like we're kind of getting there now.
Right.
But
Right.
a lot of the sort of what I'll call the A24, rise, I just kind of went like, oh man, I should be obsessed with this movie, and yet there's something there that's not quite doing it
Yeah.
for me.
You
And,
think
and
Hedwig has spoiled it for you?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's so
Hedwig and other
good.
movies,
The bar is so high.
or
Yeah.
being old, it's like when you've seen 100 movies, a movie can like change your life. When you've seen 3,000 movies, you're kind of like, yeah, I've seen
I'm
I've
good.
seen a movie before. I know
And
what this is.
at a certain point, I've heard this a lot, but like at a certain point, you are at your most impressionable at that age. Like
Right.
those are the things and the films and the music that is going to shape your life for the rest of your life. And what's one of the, I think, luckily I've been proven wrong constantly.
Mm,
Hedwig and the Angry Inch is a great example. I can't say itch. They even have a joke at the beginning of the movie where they're
right.
like, "No, it's not itch, it's inch."
Yeah.
But like I always feel like, oh, my reservoir is completely full. I've heard every song that I'm truly gonna love. I've seen every movie that I'm truly gonna enjoy or
Right.
embrace in a meaningful way. And it's that fear as you get older of like, am I ever gonna feel this way about anything again? And what I love is that I've been continually proven wrong through my life. Like, oh,
Right.
I was going through a music slump recently. This is great because there is a Hedwig connection here. But I for a couple months, when I get obsessed with a certain band, I only listen to that band. I'm not the kind of
Mm,
person who can shuffle on Spotify and listen to a bunch of different
right.
artists. I get very obsessive about a certain artist, and I was between artists, and I was like, what am I going to listen to? Uh, I couldn't find anything, and then I just happened upon Roxy Music a few
Mm,
weeks ago, and they are my band right now. I'm
nice.
super obsessed, and I was watching behind the scenes stuff on the Criterion channel from Hedwig, and Mitchell was talking about they would close out some of their early performances before Hedwig was a show,
Right.
with one of the Roxy Music songs. Now I can't remember what it is, and
Mm.
I'm trading in my card, but I was just like, yes, I get, like, this is
Just say it was
it's a
Slave
perfect.
to Love, and
Yes,
I'll believe it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's the perfect example of just like connecting these two dots of like, you want to find that movie that's going to move you in the same way that it did when you were in your 20s, and you
Right.
want to find that song that's going to move you. And when you do, it is a powerful reminder of like, that is, you're constantly evolving, you're constantly changing, and you're constantly able to adopt new things into your life and your repertoire. But I will say, like, what moved me the most, and I think what makes this story kind of universal in a way, and you can relate to as a straight male, like, is like that feeling of loneliness and sadness, and like,
Mm,
who am I? Like, she doesn't really know who she is, and is this is this a persona? Is this who she is at her core? Is it
Mhm.
a put on to as a defense mechanism? But also that anger pushing the people in your life who love you away because you don't know what love is, or you haven't learned how to love because the love you've experienced has been abusive or twisted. And that was very, very affecting, that feeling of like, even as Hedwig is doing things where it's despicable, and she's ripping up what's his name's passport, and
Oh
just
yeah.
doing really awful things and being cruel to the people around her, you feel for her because you understand the pain of just like what this person has gone through and how it's shaped who they are. And I think what makes it so powerful is just that sense of universality of like, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're from, and like who you love, like we all want to love and we all want to be loved. We all want to find that person we can connect to.
Right.
And sometimes what it comes down to is like, you're not going to be able to love purely or truly until you're able to accept and love yourself. And that feels like what Hedwig's journey is in this film, is acceptance, forgiveness, but also reconciling with, like you said, is Tommy
Yeah,
really
yeah.
Hedwig? Like, is that the other half? Like, kind of coming to peace with that part of who she is, and being able to shed that skin finally and say, okay, like walking down the alley completely naked and bare, and
Mhm.
like, I'm reborn, like let's go discover who I am. I found that very, very moving. And I think that what I love about a film like this, and being able to watch a film about a person like this, is it's a reminder that we are not all so different. Like, we don't have to categorize ourselves. Like, we can embrace each other and say like, this is really, really cool, and we can connect deep, on a deep, deep level, on this journey, even though we might be going through different things. And found that just very, very powerful and very, very emotional.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's beautifully said. I think another thing going along with that that I love is I love a movie that can just pick an emotion and just stew on it for the whole time and really make me feel like I want to be there, even though it's in real life it's an uncomfortable place to be. But when you can be there in we all listen to sad songs and everything, right? It's like a lot of people say when I'm sad I want to listen to happy music, and I'm like, no, I want to listen to music that feels like I feel, but
Same,
then
yeah.
also when I'm happy, I also want to listen to that music because I also like going to that place kind of safely,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
5 minutes and then coming back from it. Um, and uh, I'll mention Scott Pilgrim again, where it's just like there's something there for a movie that's kind of goofy and fun. Like there's something there where it just feels like there's a really raw emotion happening there. A scene that I find so heartbreaking, and it's not even a scene, it's just a moment, is right after Scott breaks up with Knives, he's on the bus, and there are images flashing past where it's kind of like alternating between him and then the images that he's thinking about. He's thinking about Knives, and he just is so sad, and then he starts thinking about Ramona, and those images come by, and then he gets happy, and it's just like it's so hard to like watch that moment because it's like, yeah, you just broke someone's heart and you really hurt someone's feelings, but also you're really happy about this other thing, and like both
Yes.
those things are true at the same time. And how do you kind of juggle that?
Yeah.
um I also weirdly, I'll talk about this all the time. I love Quantum of Solace
Mm.
because it's just a movie about heartbreak, and it's like that's not what a Bond movie is supposed to be. But it's just like, what if the guy who has a license to kill got his heart broken, but then has a mission he has to go on.
Right.
He's just like bitter and like in this certain mood the whole time. But I feel like the thing that doesn't get talked about with that movie is that it is actually capturing a mood and living
Mm.
with that mood in a way that you don't think about when you go to watch an action movie.
Right.
So when the movie is sloppy, you're just like, oh, that movie was sloppy. It's like, yeah, but it was doing this thing that like I don't
Yeah.
know if so yeah, I think, so that with everything that you said, is this movie is just it's one of those ways that like can just take you on this really raw emotional journey in a way that feels enjoyable to be on.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you fall into the trap of like being so self-serious that you can't crack a joke, and this movie
Right.
walks that line very, very. I don't want to say gingerly. It kind of obliterates the line.
Uh-huh.
It draws its own line in a way,
Right.
but does it beautifully. Like it's like it can, like you said, it can be wacky, but then it will like sit with this moment of like we are just in a close up on Hedwig's face as she's performing this like and just like it's very simple and but it's very, very effective and very impressive, performance wise, direction wise. I just am like very, very impressed and want this guy to have done more. Yeah,
Just real quick before we
yeah,
go off of it, I just want to mention the like what I'm going to call drag queen humor here,
yeah.
because I'm always, for someone who, as far as I know, like John Cameron Mitchell would never did that as like a hobby or anything. There's the sharpness of the humor, but then also it's so dry that when it just suddenly goes into the sort of emotional, real, raw places we're talking about, it doesn't feel like it's like I was doing stand up and then now I'm over here.
Yes.
So but all these lines, like, when people think of huge openings, they often think of me.
Right.
But it's like, but it's in this dry kind of drag queen humor way that then when it's like suddenly, and it's all in Cameron Mitchell's performance. Cameron's his middle name. I don't know why I said Cameron Mitchell. But
Yeah, I
it's
don't
all,
know. Do we call him John? Do we call him
yeah.
Mitchell? Do we call
So
him
it's all
Mr. Cameron Mitchell?
in JC's performance, where it's just like
Just-
everything is so dry and sarcastic, and then when it suddenly goes into like really introspective and serious, you're like, yeah, that actually feels like you didn't change tone. You
yeah,
kind of were in the same tone that was making me laugh a second ago, and then now you're making me cry, but without suddenly being like, "Gotcha," pulled the rug out from under you. It's just like
yes.
it all feels like a very cohesive space. I
Yeah,
think there's something really cool about that.
I think you're right, and I think like it's the character too, because the character, I think like the
Hmm.
humor comes from a place of defensiveness almost. Like it is that kind of irreverent. Like what was the joke about the ant and like who'd you have to kill to get
Yeah.
that? Like oh my, or who had to
My,
die for you to get that?
my Aunt Trudy, I said, just
Yes,
walked away.
yeah. So like there's those kinds of jokes, but then there's like a kind of like world weariness to the way he performs the jokes. Like
Yeah.
Hedwig is fed up with herself, and
Right.
she is. It gives you permission to kind of you feel kind of like the jokes are funny, but you feel the pain behind the jokes, so that when you transition into the like the more serious dramatic stuff, you recognize the pain. You're like, I see the pain in the
Right.
humor. Like I see the pain in the performance. I see, the energy is there. The uh, uh, angry, the angry inch is a funny song, but the anger is real and
Right.
the
Right.
experience is raw. So it's like, it's all, there's substance to what's going on beneath the humor, which I think in a lot of cases you don't have the substance. You are just like waka waka. It's the joke.
Right.
It's the
Exactly.
punchline. Things like that. So it just speaks to the strength of the writing too.
Yeah.
That works so well. The music is great too, which I
Mm.
kind of expected, because I kind of knew it was a musical. I didn't fully know, but it delivered on every level. I think if I think punk rock musical,
Yeah.
like I said, this song, the film is a punk song encapsulated, but
Yeah.
with that layer of genuine emotion underneath that you don't necessarily associate with that genre.
Hmm.
But I loved the music, and am probably going to end up listening to the soundtrack at some point or other in my life.
You should. I also recommend Neil Patrick Harris performing Sugar Daddy at the Tonys.
Oh my god.
It's great. He does
Did
the
he
car
do did he
wash.
do a stint
Oh
on?
yeah, yeah. He was
That's
so
great.
Hedwig's been an interesting. It was Lena Hall. Well, okay. I have to ask you this first. At what point did you realize that Yitzhak was played by a woman?
Uh I was like, this has to be like, it makes sense,
Right.
because you have JC playing Hedwig, and then I was
Right.
like, why is this guy's voice so high? It's like an
Right.
octave higher, like, and then looking into it and realizing like, oh, like there was a moment of confusion looking at the cast and being like, oh yeah, now, well, yeah, it makes sense though. Like it's like it
Right.
makes sense that the husband is actually a woman, and he's, it was kind of interesting and funny. So it was something struck me immediately, and I had to look it up and was like, Oh, how interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think I didn't know for the first time I watched the movie, but I could tell like there's
Yeah.
something different about Yitzhak, but also like, she's playing this like Eastern European, man. So it's like, oh, maybe
Right.
that's just like that person's voice, like
Right.
maybe that's how
Yeah.
people from that country sound, whatever country that. Um, but so in the show it's the same, and traditionally in the show it's more of like a slick back greaser kind of guy.
Right.
um but Lena Hall plays, so in that clip that I was talking about, she plays Yitzhak. She played Hedwig for a while, which was
Oh,
interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Neil Patrick Harris played Hedwig. Taye Diggs, um Michael C. Hall, Dexter, um
Wow.
Darren Chris. So there's been this interesting kind of revolving door of Hedwigs that always just feels interesting, and there's never been I think Sugar Daddy with Neil Patrick Harris is the only like like legit footage you can find of any
Right.
of these performances, right? Because obviously you can find bootlegs and all that kind of stuff. I think I watched, forgive me, but watched a bootleg when John Cameron Mitchell reprised the role a few
Sure.
years
Yeah.
ago. So
How could you not?
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, so the Sugar Daddy is truncated in the movie, but Neil Patrick Harris does the whole performance, and the car wash thing he does to Orlando Bloom. He sits on Sting's lap at one point. He licks Sam Jackson's glasses and puts them back. You can see Sam
Perfect.
Jackson was like, I wasn't expecting that.
I love that
It's a
so
lot of fun.
much. So I wanted to ask you, like, the film, I mean, it was critically acclaimed. It was kind of a Sundance darling, but like didn't like it was a popular theatrical production, but then when it was brought to theaters, it just kind of disappeared. Like it didn't make its money back. It lost money. Like,
Sure.
what do you think? Like, there was some elements. I remember he was talking about it was like September 11th happened like right
Right.
in the midst of it. And I'm sure and on some level could have affected the performance of the film. But like, what do you think it is? Like, it's a bizarre movie for sure. They were talking, I
Hmm.
was watching the documentary and they were talking about just like the early off-Broadway shows. Like, you just got the vibe like from the audience, like people would walk out and it's like, it wasn't working for the people who were normally like participating in the scene. Like, it's like people who love theater were like, this is a little bit too punk and weird for us, and then the people who like punk, it's like it's a little too theatrical, and it took a little bit of time. And it makes sense that now this has a cult following, but just like wanted to get your thoughts. Like, do you see this being like, could it have been a runaway success, or does it make sense that like once it was released in theaters it kind of had like a little bit of a box office bomb and sort of disappeared? Like, it doesn't quite appeal to a general audience in the same way, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's, look, there's a lot that goes into that kind of thing. You never know when you can't, if you could guarantee something is going to be a hit, then everyone would be rich all the time, right? Um, and so I don't think it doesn't surprise me that it was a small movie, and just because of what it is. Also, we have we have this weird kind of roller coaster, or I guess pendulum swinging back and forth of like what people are looking for in a movie, right? So it's like I was talking, in the first half about Donnie Darko, and some of these movies, like I think Boondock Saints, right? Like those movies that I
Mm,
watched in college that kind of came out in theaters, were in theaters for 2 weeks and left, and then someone found the DVD at Walmart in the 550 bin, and then now everyone in that college is passing that around and watching it every day, and it's
yeah.
becoming this huge hit and stuff. Um, so I think it's like if you look at 1999 and what an insane year that was for film, and then it doesn't surprise me that a lot of the movies that I just mentioned came out in 2000, 2001, 2002,
Mm,
when it's like people are kind of waiting for the Matrix sequel, or the Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter, or the Star Wars Episode 2,
yeah.
where it's like they're not necessarily looking for the art house film that's around the corner, right?
Yeah.
And then what have we had over the past 10 years, right? We had the Star Wars and Marvel in like the 2010s, just both being the biggest thing ever, side by side. So it's like, forget about it. If you were some small, art house film or whatever, then everyone got sick of that. And now, Barbie and Oppenheimer and Challengers, as I just mentioned, like those are the movies people are excited about right now,
Yeah.
more so than probably like Captain America, Brave New World, um, uh, or whatever, or The
Whatever
Acolyte,
Star
like
Wars, yeah.
right, like The Acolyte is currently
the
airing,
countless
and
Star Wars properties that
right,
are on the slate.
right, and I think that like that is just the way that this kind of pendulum of popularity works, and that's true of every medium, whether it's fashion or food or anything. um so it's kind of you can't look at a movie in a vacuum and just be like, why didn't this movie do better? You kind of have to look at the bigger picture and be like, oh yeah, it came out during the pandemic, or it came out
Mm.
right after 2001, whatever it was. Or just like, what were people excited to go see in the theaters at that point? So if you were like, oh man, there are 3 movies I want to see in the theater in next month, then like you're not thinking, but what am I going to go see tonight? You're like, no, I'm
Yeah.
going to wait for next
Yes.
month
Yeah.
because I'm going to go see, because again, it's like 2001 was, I think, I'm just off the top of my head, I think was it the first Harry Potter and the first Lord of the Rings? Were they
Yeah. They
both
both came out
2001?
that
Yeah.
that fall.
And then so but then it's like, also all the other franchises I mentioned, it was just like, it was a crazy time for
Well,
all
yeah,
that
and then
stuff. So
Spider-Man was the following year,
right,
so it was just
right.
like everything that was literally like the turn of the century really changed the landscape in a way that we're still
Right.
seeing the ripple effects of.
And it was like epics. So it's sort of like we went from Braveheart to Gladiator and a lot of other stuff in between. That lasted until about 2005 or so.
Yeah,
Kind of, I think, like around the time Kingdom of Heaven came out, people were like, I don't really want to go see these anymore. Like, I'm a
right.
little tired. So it's just like, you just couldn't be a small movie during during
Yeah,
that time and expect,
it's not a good
unless you
time.
just got
Yeah,
really lucky and just happened to be an Oscar darling, or happened to be one of these that just
yeah.
kind of broke through.
I'm kind of surprised this movie didn't get. And we talk about the Oscars as if it's like it should, like it's like, yeah, the Oscars, the ultimate
Right, right.
award, like the ultimate definition of what constitutes quality in a film, which is ridiculous. So putting that little side, like that note aside, it is kind of strange to me that this movie fell under that radar too, like
Yeah.
award season, and just in terms of what I know that John Cameron Mitchell was nominated for a Golden Globe for his
Okay.
performance.
Nice.
Um, but like this movie didn't really get much more attention. And I know it comes down to like, what do you have a budget for award season? Like, can you like get the people who are voting in your back pocket, like all that kind of stuff, and the politics of it go into it. But there is just this element of like, why this is a remarkable achievement on many levels, and just the fact that it's like, yeah, well, we'll give him a nomination for the performance, and I'm like, for all the reasons we've discussed now, like cinematography, directing, like music, like it just feels like there's a lot to praise here, and it's
Absolutely.
very bizarre that it's just like it was a critical darling, but then just sort of fell off the radar and kind of got some like consolation prize nominations.
Right,
It's
right.
like, well,
Y-
what can you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, I mean, we could go on a huge awards show tangent, which we won't. But I will say that every year for the past few years, I've been like kind of keeping a ranking of movies as I watch them throughout the year. Just really for my own, like, I don't really care, like, oh, is this number 4, number 5? Like, that's not really important to me. It's more just kind of like, what are the movies that stuck with me the most? What are the movies that just kind of like annoyed me? And then revisiting that list over the course of the year and be like, oh, this movie that I loved in March, I haven't really thought about it in 6 months, so now it's hard to
It's
whatever.
amazing. It's
um
amazing how often that happens, and it's especially like, I mean, it happens with the Oscars as well. Like all the movies that were nominated, you're like, I don't think of a single one of those ever.
right. Well, so then what I was going to say was like, it's always interesting for me. I'm always trying to do that in my trying to be as honest with myself as possible, right? I'm not trying to give a movie an extra point because of this or that or whatever, or I'm not trying to like give it a negative point because I know it's going to be like an Oscar movie. I'm just trying to be like just my purest kind of reaction to it. And it's always like half the movies of my top 10 or whatever are the best picture nominees, and the other half are not even in the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And like, that's just, that's just the way it works, right?
Yeah.
And that's not because the Oscars are dumb. It's not because I'm dumb. It's just like that's how these things work, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that there are I guarantee you every single year, there is some movie that no one is talking about, like literally no one is talking about, that is insanely incredible, right?
It's going to be the movie that we are talking about 10 years
Possibly,
from
quite
now.
right,
And
right,
this
right,
and the same way where it's like, why didn't anyone talk about Hedwig and the Angry Inch?
right.
Like, the same way it's going to be that conversation of like this film that nobody talked about that like is awesome, is
Right.
insane, and deserves more attention.
And I also, just to wrap it up real quick, like I also love having things that feel like they're mine, like
Yes.
it's like when I think like Kate Blanchett was first starting being in things, I was like, oh man, she's great. Like she's one of my favorite actors. And then like 2 years later, everyone was like, no, she's one of everyone's favorite actor. And it's like, oh no, but she was like mine for a second,
That was kind
or
of my experience with The Big Lebowski, is a film
exactly.
that
Yeah.
I went from not liking to thinking is probably my favorite comedy and maybe my favorite Coen Brothers movie. And I saw it in a theater, like with an audience, and just that exact emotion of what you're describing, of that feeling of
Mhm.
like everyone's quoting this, and this is like my movie and I'm the only one who's supposed to recognize how brilliant it is. And now
Right.
it feels like, it's just that weird moment of like, oh, I'm just one of these people now, like I'm just part of the crowd. And it felt so personal, so I totally
Yeah.
get that.
And you want the things that you like to be seen and heard and experienced by other people, right? But there's
Yeah.
also something that when you have something that feels like it's yours, that I mean, literally right now, what is happening is I am sharing something with you that is not more popular, right? Like, because if it was, you probably would have seen it already.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's, it becomes a movie because it's a movie that feels like it's mine. And when I say mine, I mean, it's not every person I meet. It's like, oh yeah, of course I've seen that movie 10 times. It's like, it's not the case. So then it's like, that feels like it literally is part of
You're
my
the
identity.
film's champion in a way.
Well, I was
Like
gonna say it's part of my identity. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It becomes something where I'm like, this isn't just a movie I like. This is a movie that I feel like liking this movie is part of when I think about who I am as a person and why I am the way I am. Part of those things are like, why do I love this thing and that
Yeah.
thing, more than the average person? And you may not know what the answer to those questions are, but you do know that, okay, whatever that thing is, that gene that makes me gravitate towards these things, that is because of who I am as a person,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
and so there is something beautiful about when something feels like it is something that you personally have a special relationship with.
Definitely. And I'm glad I enjoyed it too, because I
Me
would
too.
hate to come back and ruin
But that
our
also would have been
friendship.
fascinating. It's like
Yeah, it is nice, and Missing Frames is a nice place to have those conversations of like, oh, interesting. Okay, so this movie that everyone loves that you didn't love, Michael the Exorcist, but
right.
like things like that, like it is fun, but it is, you never want to come in and be like, yeah, that movie you really love, it's pretty awful. So,
Right.
but I love, I thank you for sharing this with me. It is a great movie, really, really special, and something I think, I feel overwhelmed by it, and like kind of like definitely got to the end thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have to watch that again, because I
Yeah.
feel like just by the time you get to the end of it, you start to see everything in a different context just through the final scene. So
Yeah, it's a very rewarding rewatch,
yes,
as I can tell you from having seen it several
I'm
times.
looking forward to watching it again. But we'll go ahead and give it a rating. I think it's no secret what your rating is, but on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, how many angry inches would you give Hedwig?
I'd give it 5 bishops in a turtleneck.
Great, perfect. I'll give it a 4. I will give it a solid
Nice.
4. And I think it is a film that I will definitely want to revisit, and certainly a film soundtrack that I will be putting on rotation for
Yeah,
sure.
Wig in a Box especially.
Yes.
It's so catchy and just so fun to put on. My partner also loves the movie, so that's just on our house playlist, and whenever it comes on, we're singing, and then we have to sing the part where it's, okay, everybody, and then they do the like sing along part.
I love that. Again, very, very theatrical, funny, unique cinematic thing that's
Right.
like somebody who made this movie knew how to tell a visual story.
Yeah.
Very impressive. But Brian, thank you so much for hanging out again. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And, tell the good people at home where you are and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. We are at Beyond the Screenplay, which you can find in all your podcast places. We are just now launching our sequel summer season, where we're going to be looking at a lot of the sequels that are coming out this summer. So Inside Out 2, Furiosa, some prequels to Furiosa, Quiet Place Day 1, Alien Romulus, Deadpool and Wolverine, Twister and Twisters. So it's going to be a fun blockbustery season. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to that. And you can find me hanging out here and also on Twitter at YayShondorman, on Letterboxd, ShondorMan05. Do you have a Letterboxd, Brian?
I do, but I use it. I literally use it just to like check off. Yes, I've watched this movie. Like, I don't use it for anything else. That's how you should use it. Yeah, that works too. So that's where you can find me. And thank you again. Thank you everybody for listening. And we will see you at the movies.
When the earth was still flat and clouds